something that monopolies will do called price discrimination. And when you first hear that, it probably stirs up some negative connotation. We probably feel like price discrimination is really bad. Price discrimination is against the law. Price discrimination is somehow violating people's rights. And maybe some people would think it's a bad thing. But let's say that you go into a restaurant, or some restaurants, not all of them, but some restaurants, and you're there with your grandparent or an elderly aunt or uncle or someone, and you both get a drink or a cup of coffee or something. Oftentimes in that restaurant, who's going to pay a lower price? Senior citizen, right? Why? You get senior citizen discounts, right? Okay. If you go to the movies with your younger brother or sister or little cousin, little niece, nephew, little kid, and you go buy movie tickets, who's going to pay a different price? Because you got, so the younger sibling, younger niece, nephew pays the child's price, right? Some of you will find out next year as you go to college that you may go to certain places and get student discounts, whether that's to the movies or at restaurants or things like that. If you had booked a flight to, I don't know, California or something, and you booked your flight weeks ago, months ago, okay, and then your friend decides they're going to come with you, and they got to book their flight today, for the trip that's going to take place next week. Are they going to pay likely the same you did? They're probably going to pay more, right? All of that is price discrimination. So any of those examples, plus many more, that is what we call price discrimination, charging different customers different things based on certain circumstances. So let's first define what price discrimination is, and then we'll talk about why monopolists will use this and how it certainly benefits the monopolists, but it can benefit consumers as well, because it gives more people an opportunity to make a transaction and purchase a good that might not have otherwise. So we have a single price monopolist, and everything we've done thus far, all of our look at monopolies up until this point, all the graphs we've seen and all the questions that we have answered have had to do with a single price monopolist. And a single price monopolist is just what it sounds like. It means that they charge all customers the same price. So everybody pays the same thing. Again, all of the examples that we've looked at before were single price monopolists. MR equals MC at this point. We see what consumers are willing to pay at that level of output, and that is the price that everybody is charged. But remember that does create inefficiency. That does create deadweight loss. There are people that are going to be excluded from that were willing to pay, maybe a little bit less, but not the price that a monopolist is going to charge. So price discrimination is when the monopolist charges different prices to different customers for the same good. In order for it to be price discrimination, it's got to be, different customers are paying different prices for the same thing. If they just increase the price for everyone, that's not price discrimination. If it's a different good, or if it has different features to it, like this version costs this much, but if you want the luxury seating on the plane and all this business, that costs more, that's not price discrimination if the good is different. So this is your stuff like your student discounts, perhaps, or senior citizen discounts, or discounts if you book something in advance, or higher fees if you do something closer to the event, like booking a seat on a plane or a hotel room or those kind of things. All of those are examples of price discrimination. So it's stuff that we really see on a day-to-day basis, and probably stuff we're typically familiar with, and sometimes even a lot of things in which we might enjoy, we might like, we might even find ourselves wanting to take advantage of from time to time. Now, as far as how monopolies will price discriminate, or how they make decisions about who they would price discriminate against, or how they would utilize those practices, it usually deals with elasticity. It's related to people's elasticity of demand for certain goods. Because this is going to mean that some people will pay a higher price for the same thing that others are going to pay a lower price, and all that willingness to pay stuff. And that has to do with people's elasticity of demand for certain goods. So they are usually going to base those decisions about price discrimination on a group's sensitivity to that price, or their elasticity of demand. So if they know that a particular group of people is going to respond really drastically to a lower price, and that's really going to dramatically increase the quantity that they're going to purchase, then they're more likely to lower the price for that particular group of people. If they know that raising a price is not going to have as much of an effect, that would have something to do with how they would price discriminate as well. So typically, those with a higher elasticity of demand are going to get a lower price when it comes to price discrimination. So those with a higher elasticity of demand, those that are more sensitive to that change in price, those that if the price goes up, their quantity demanded is going to decrease by a lot, or if the price goes down, their quantity demanded is going to increase by a lot. That is where we're more likely to see people get a lower price. And think about the whole like booking flights and such. Price elasticity of demand there. If it is someone that is paying for they're scheduling a trip that is months in advance, maybe even a year in advance, how responsive are they going to be to the pricing there? If this is something that's in the future, it's probably not a huge, it's probably more of a vacation kind of a thing, something they got lots of time to plan for. What's their elasticity of demand going to be? Is it going to be low or is it going to be high? It'll be higher because they're not planning for something that's got to happen today. It's not like, oh, I've got to fly across the country today to get to this business meeting or to get to this family event or something that's right now. I've got time. So they've got time to wait. They've got time to find other options. They've got time to wait for the price to change. They've got time to wait to see what other airlines are offering or to maybe even change their plans altogether. So they're much more sensitive to that change in price. So that's why they're going to be offered the lower price. This is why airlines and hotels and things like that, things in the travel industry, tend to charge a lower price when you book stuff well in advance because those are people with a higher elasticity of demand. However, people with a lower elasticity of demand, oftentimes that's going to mean a higher price. So high elasticity, low price, low elasticity, high price. So again, going back to the example of someone booking a flight or a hotel room even. If it's something that, let's say that they just found out they've got to be at this business meeting tomorrow, or there's some kind of a family emergency and they just got to be across the country to be with their family or something like that. Do they have high or low elasticity of demand? It's low. Their demand is more inelastic, right? The price is not going to matter so much to them. They would be in a situation to say, I've got to get a plane ticket and if I have to pay, gobs of money to do it, then that's what I got to do. That's a lower elasticity of demand. Their demand is more elastic. It's not going to matter to them so much what the price is. They're going to purchase anyway. So that's why those, airlines, hotels, again, the travel industry is a great example of this. Why if you're booking something for that day, that week, if you're going to pay a higher price, it has to do with the elasticity, and that's an example of price discrimination. Then you could also use that same analogy for like student discounts. College students, all going to be college students next year. Lower prices, discounts for college students. Why? Why would college students have a higher elasticity of demand? Less money, yeah. The idea is college students are, busy in school. If they're working, it's probably a part-time job. Many of them don't even have that, so they're having to pay their own bills. They're on their own. They're paying for school, so they don't have as much money. So we're going to find out next year, maybe. So the idea is to give lower prices, discounts, so that they'll respond to that, and then there's more quantity sold. Same thing for senior citizens, lower income, more fixed income, living off retirement income, so lower price for that. And other things is that you can think of all kinds of discount situations. And the reason why firms would do this, it's not about we want to be, because sometimes, yes, there's, a public relations thing here about we're, helping out those that are not as fortunate, and, we support military families, we support senior citizens, all those kind of things. Oh, yes, that's absolutely part of it, but that's more of a marketing thing than it is an economics thing. But the reason why firms would do this from an economic standpoint, and they wouldn't do it if it didn't benefit them. No firm is going to do that if it's not going to benefit from it. They overall will increase their profits this way. We would think that if they're lowering the price for some people, cutting into their profits, but it actually increases their profits. It increases their profits, it increases the number of transactions that are going to be made, and it eliminates any of the consumer surplus. Because it means that those that, if you have a single price monopolist situation, there's lots of people that aren't going to make that transaction, but if you can lower the price for some and not all, then you make those transactions. You're eliminating some of that deadweight loss. It means that overall more quantity is sold, more of the good or service are going to be sold, and you're not driving away those that want a lower price. You're not necessarily driving away those that are not going to pay the price at which people overall are willing to pay for that particular quantity. So they overall increase the amount that's going to be sold, therefore increasing their revenue and increasing their profits. Okay, now there's price discrimination that we talked about, and then there's the theoretical concept of perfect price discrimination. Now this is going to be one of those many things, like a lot of things in economics, where it's really theoretical. It's probably not very likely that most firms could actually perfectly price discriminate. It is a theory kind of a thing, but we will use this concept a lot, partially for simplicity's sake. Usually when we see questions regarding price discrimination, it usually is going to tell us that they can perfectly price discriminate. So we need to know what that means and how that works. It simplifies things. It makes it pretty easy. Perfect price discrimination means that a monopolist could charge each consumer based on their willingness to pay. So it's sort of like saying the company, the firm, can charge each one of us in this room the exact price that we're willing to pay. That may mean that there's 9 of us in here. It may mean there's 9 different prices, okay? That each they're going to charge this person $5. This person's willingness to pay is $5.03. They're going to pay $5.03. This person is willing to pay $6. They're going to pay $6. It's meeting every single consumer's willingness to pay. And you can see how, in reality, that would be downright impossible. It would be very, very borderline impossible, if not actually impossible, for a monopolist to actually do that. So usually, you're going, or in real life, what you see is student discounts, senior citizen discounts, time-related discounts or things like that. Coupons, even that's an example of price discrimination, because some people will give coupons, some don't, or might not think to bring it or use it. Those are examples. So they're not charging each specific consumer a different price. It might be 2 or 3 different prices. But in perfect price discrimination, you're making that assumption that they would be able to meet everybody's willingness to pay. And what perfect price discrimination would create is there would be no inefficiency, there would be no deadweight loss. You'd eliminate all of that because you'd be able to make all of those transactions. There wouldn't be any missed opportunities. All beneficial transactions would be made. You wouldn't be missing that one person that was, willing to pay this price or what have you. There is no inefficiency. It eliminates deadweight loss, but that is captured by the producer and becomes part of their profit. So it increases the producer surplus. It eliminates consumer surplus. If a firm is able to perfectly price discriminate, there won't be any consumer surplus because everybody's willingness to pay was exactly met. So nobody paid less than what they were willing to pay. Therefore, nobody has any consumer surplus. So the total consumer surplus is 0. All of that is going to be captured as profit. So let's say that for a single price monopolist, if this was the price right here, okay, then all this would become our deadweight loss. We have all these missed transactions right here. These represent all the people that are not willing to pay that particular price. But let's say they're able to price discriminate and they're able to charge some people this price, but others this price. then they're taking away some of that deadweight loss. Now, in this case, this is not perfect price discrimination. You'd still be left with some deadweight loss. But you see how their overall profit, their overall sales they're able to make increases, and their overall profits increase. So it's more beneficial to the producer, and you can also argue more beneficial to the consumer, because more people are going to be able to take advantage of that particular good or service that wouldn't have with the single price monopolist situation. Okay, let's see this again. This one, here we have our monopoly that does not price discriminate, and always be looking for those words from now on if it says that they're a single price monopolist or a monopolist that does not price discriminate. So MR equals MC right there, but that's not the price they're going to charge. They're going to charge right up here, and they're making a profit, and this box represents their profit. So single price monopolist, like we've seen before, that is how they what their profit situation would look like. But if they're able to price discriminate, like they're able to over here, all right, MR equals MC right there now, okay? And so now they're able to make all of these transactions, and you can see that their profit is much larger if they're able to price discriminate than if they weren't. Now, one thing you may have noticed there is that this time you didn't have a separate demand and marginal revenue curve. That's going to be true of perfectly price discriminating monopolies, and we're just going to take a look at why. So let's look at that, and then we'll draw that graph again. So this is similar to what we did the other day. We're going to sort of break down the relationship between price and marginal revenue, but this time we're going to do it with a price discriminating monopoly. So let's start with, okay, at 11 units, none will be sold according to our demand schedule, so the total revenue is 0. Then at $10, 1 unit is going to be sold. Okay, so their total revenue is 10, marginal revenue is 10. All right, now, here's where things get different. We go to 9 units. But this time, we're perfectly price discriminating. So all units are not $9, just the second one. The first unit is what? It's still $10. First unit's $10. The second unit is $9. So the total revenue is $19, okay? In a single price monopolist situation, what would the total revenue be? It would have been 18, because both of those units would have been $9. If they're charging a single price, they're all $9. This is why marginal revenue and demand are not the same for a single price monopolist, because it's not like they're charging this price to this consumer and this price to that consumer. I explained that a few days ago. But in a price discriminating situation, they are doing that. Okay. So this time, so now the marginal revenue is 9. Notice the marginal revenue in both of these cases is the same as the price. So now we go to, let's lower the price to $8. They're going to sell 3 units at $8. But this time, they're not selling all 8 of them for $3. They're selling the first one for 10, the second one for 9, and the third one for 8. So that's how we get a total revenue of 27. That's the 10 plus 9, that's 19, plus 8 is 27. So that means my marginal revenue is 8, going from 19 to 27. So once again, price and marginal revenue, it was the same this time. Okay, we don't see that with single price monopolists, but we do with price discriminating monopolists. Okay, now $7, 4 are demanded, but it's not $7 for all 4 of them. It's $10, 9, 8, and 7. So you add all those numbers up, that's your total revenue of 34. And it continues on like that. So notice for a price discriminating monopolist, what do we notice here about the relationship between price and marginal revenue? It's the same. They are the same, just like they are in perfect competition. So draw this little chart right here, or this graph here, and write this down. So for price discriminating monopolies, make sure you remember this, because I have made this mistake multiple times, and then go, oh yeah, I do that. If the monopolist is a perfect price discriminator, then the marginal revenue is equal to the demand. In that case, and only in that case, would you draw one curve that represents both demand and marginal revenue. If it is not price discriminating, then they're separate. So if it's single price or non-price discriminating, you intend the separate curves like we've been doing. But if they price discriminate, and usually it's going to tell you they perfectly price discriminate, then it's just the one. begins with putting our cost curves in and all that stuff to once again see how the profit situation is dramatically changed and how the consumer surplus gets eliminated and all that is captured instead as profit for the producer. Okay, so here's our typical non-price discriminating monopolist that we've been looking at. So the profit maximizing quantity is where MR equals MC, but that's not the price that they charge. They charge what people are willing to pay. So we have price M. Their average total cost is right here, so they are making a profit. Everything from that average total cost up to the price, that box right there. So we can see that it's, it's a profit, but you sort of get a mental picture of the size of that, okay? Now remember, if they're perfectly price discriminating, that means that they can charge each individual their specific willingness to pay, and then we see that different thing happening with the demand and the marginal revenue. So now, instead of having two separate curves, one for demand, one for marginal revenue, if they're perfectly price discriminating, it is just the one. That is now demand and marginal revenue, okay? So now, they are going to still produce at a quantity where MR equals MC, which is now right here, okay? So they're producing that quantity and charging that price. And so, all of this now, but it's not just these. They can also charge get everybody under here as well. So instead of there being people that are kind of left out of that transaction, now they can price discriminate and charge a higher price to those with that lower elasticity of demand. So that's going to become, there's their, price right there, multiple prices. It's not just one. So we don't pull a price across like that and do PM like we did before, because there's multiple prices. People are paying any number of prices in between here. So there's lots of different ones. And all of this funky shape right here, all of that becomes profit. There is no consumer surplus in this situation and no deadweight loss. So it eliminates all of that. So price discrimination results in several different prices. So we do not see that price being shown specifically on that price axis because there's multiple ones. Overall, lot profit. If you think about the graph we saw before this one, that green area showing the profit was a lot smaller than what we see right there. There's no consumer surplus. No deadweight loss. And a higher socially optimal quantity. In other words, they're producing more the quantity that people want. Remember, a social optimal quantity would mean they're producing where demand equals the marginal cost, and that is what they're doing right here. So it puts them at a more allocatively efficient level of production. Okay, so again, price discrimination, quite common. Overall, it increases the profits for the producer, it increases their producer surplus, it eliminates consumer surplus, which makes it sound like it's all really bad for consumers, but not necessarily so. It means that more people actually are able to obtain that good. You have it's more socially optimal, you have more of the quantity being produced that society actually wants to be produced in that particular case. More people are able to make that transaction than might have been able to do so before. So generally, this is seen as, it's hard to say good or bad, but it does create more efficiency and is far less inefficient than a single price monopolist, but sometimes not possible. And of course, perfect price discrimination is theoretical. Usually they're not going to be able to charge every single person a different price. It's going to be just a handful of prices. Okay. All right, so later we'll do some more examples where you really kind of get into the weeds with that and look at the numbers and kind of see how it increases profits and all that sort of stuff. But any questions on that part? That's all that is.